Hey everyone, and welcome to episode 7 of our 8XT build. Now we're going to be picking up where we left off in our last episode and getting our servo horn set onto our center throttle linkage, servo, and center diff mount. Now the reason I held off on this is because I wanted to show you guys that Spectrum Smart Servo Checker. That's a great tool to have. If you don't have it, it's no big deal. You can just set your servo horn on there straight once you get your car all set up to your radio. But that servo checker and LiPo checker is a great thing to have from Spectrum. Getting the rest of that buttoned up, and then we're going to jump over to getting our chassis set up, getting our mudguard installed, and everything like that. Pull out that big, nice chassis, nice aluminum from TLR, opening up bag G here, which is mostly our mudguards, kind of radio tray, gas tank, center chassis brace, all that good stuff. First off, the manual's got us putting on our mudguards first, so you got 4 set screws in each mudguard. Now at first I made the mistake of putting all of the nuts into the mudguards right away, and then of course when you tip the chassis up to put the screw in, I think all but one fell out, so 3 of them fell out. Now you can see them rolling off the table there. So maybe just hold off on putting those nuts inside the mudguard until you already tipped the chassis forward, but no harm done. Both the right and left side mudguard call for 4, I believe it's either 10 or 8 millimeter button head screws, or not button head screws, but like a countersunk screw and a M3 nut on the actual mudguard. It holds them on pretty stiff, no problems with them coming loose there. Alright, getting the center chassis brace installed, excuse me. Now, TLR does offer a carbon center brace instead of this aluminum one. The carbon one is obviously going to be a little stiffer than the aluminum one. I have yet to try the carbon one on the Truggy. I know the TLR guys said that the aluminum one is kind of the way to go right now. They feel that it lets the Truggy flex just enough to what it should be. I know on the 8X buggy they're running the carbon brace, so I'm wondering how that'll translate with the truck and the buggy running the different braces, so we'll just have to find out. Now getting our center diff and servo, throttle linkage, all that good stuff mounted on here. Just 4 screws mounted to the bottom of our chassis. Changed our drill battery there, getting a little weak. Now these, if you're using a drill, I recommend getting them in somewhat snug and then go ahead and finish them off with a hand wrench. You don't want to over tighten them or strip that plastic out with a drill, because it'll get the screw hot and then the plastic will melt and then it'll just strip out the plastic, which is no fun, of course. Now this is going to be our steering servo. We're using a Spectrum 6290 silver servo, same one that we're using for throttle. We're also using it for steering. One thing I do like to do with this is cut off this little boot on the servo wire. Now if you're going to do this, you need to be extra careful because you can cut the servo wires on accident. It's been done. I'm not going to say I've done it, but I know it has been done. Just be careful. You can cut that boot off and then the servo wire will slide right in to where the servo mounts. Now you don't have to do this for all servos. This is probably just for the Spectrum servo because of where the servo lead comes out, so not a huge deal there. No spacing underneath this servo for the Spectrum servo. It just mounts directly to the servo mount, which I thought was interesting because usually, you have little spacers that go under there to space a servo up. So interesting that there was no spacers for this servo. Now that's going to mount right to the chassis as well, just like our center diff just did. Now here I was trying to find a different length wire, see if I had anything shorter, but it didn't. So we're sticking with the stock long wire for now. it works just fine. Just wanted to tidy it up a little bit and make it a little shorter wiring. This mounts from underneath, like usual on a scale car. Plastic screws just screw right into the same holes that you mounted the servo through. Servos, or the screw size leaves plenty of room so they don't run into each other there. Now skipping ahead a tiny bit here. Now I'm going to be using a different switch than kind of recommended in the kit. The kit recommends you use a traditional like analog switch, but I'm actually going to use an electronic switch. So the switch hole here I'm actually covering up with electrical tape because I don't want any dust getting into the receiver box, and I really just don't want to leave a big hole in the receiver box. So you're going to see it right here when I lift up that hole I just covered with electrical tape. That was the switch hole. So usually that's covered up by the switch, but since we're going to be running an electronic switch, that's going to be left wide open. So I went ahead and put some electrical tape over there to keep it nice and sealed up. Using a Spectrum 515 receiver, I got plenty of channels to plug all of your servos and switch leads into and your transponder lead, so you got plenty of room for everything there on that receiver. Getting it taped into a receiver box. I usually put mine to the far left of the receiver box. Seems to have plenty of room if I put it there. I've seen people put it in different sections of the receiver box, but there's not too much space to play with there. Now the servo wires are going to mount right through the bottom of the receiver box. There's a little hole cut out right by where the antenna goes through. So the wires just run right through there, so it's nice and clean. They plug right into the receiver once you've run them through. Same thing with this receiver box as the center diff and the receiver pack mount with the servo attached to it. It's going to mount from the bottom of the chassis with 3 screws. These are 10mm countersunk screws, kind of usual for the receiver. It's got a nice wire holder here, so it's just a little lipped straight piece that screws into the mudguard that holds your wires in place so they're not bouncing all over the car. Pretty nice feature that TLR includes there, holding the wires in place so they're not bouncing all over the place. Routing our antenna up through the top of the receiver box. Getting our antenna plugged in. Little set screw to hold the antenna. And that's it for the receiver box. Now, I put this lid on, but I'm going to take it right back off because next up is going to be our switch install. So this is a Dynamite electronic switch. It's just got one power button, and it also reads off how much receiver pack voltage you have. Now, I was trying to find a place to put this, and I couldn't really find a good place, so I went ahead and skipped ahead until I got it installed. You guys are going to see where I ended up putting the switch here in a second. So I didn't actually keep the switch here. After I filmed this video, I moved it down to where that wire cover is, and I mounted it right on top of that wire cover with servo tape. I felt where I had it right here, it was just going to get too hot from the engine, and I didn't want to risk anything going bad, so went ahead and moved it to just in front of that throttle servo. Diving into our gas tank here, we're going to get the gas tank mounts on the chassis. Nothing too special about these gas tank mounts. The one on the far back of the gas tank, closer to the engine and the clutch, actually has kind of a fuel spill valve, if you want to call it that. It puts a piece of fuel tubing onto a little hole that runs to the bottom of the chassis, so if you spill any fuel on the top of the gas tank, it shoots through that fuel tubing and out the bottom of the chassis. I've noticed on my 8X buggy that kind of just plugs up with dirt, so I don't really know how well it works, but it's a cool idea. Not gonna bag on it too hard, but yeah, I've seen it just plugs up with dirt. Not sure if it works tremendously. Alright, got our gas tank installed. Now I'm going to take this fuel tubing out of the gas tank because I run yellow fuel tubing instead of clear or a little bit light blue fuel tubing. So we grab, this is Dubro Nitro fuel line. Now usually when I put fuel line on here, I'll cut it a little bit longer than what I have in the car already. So if I have any mistakes, I can cut it shorter, obviously. So this, you kind of just squeeze and push through the hole in the gas tank, and then you want to be careful and grab it with your pliers. Make sure your pliers don't have anything on them because you don't want to get that inside the gas tank. And then obviously put your clunk back through. Now when you put your clunk through, we're going to slow it down here. This clunk you want to have just touching the back side of the gas tank, which you might be able to see here once I hold the car up in the air. But that clunk needs to be able to touch the back side of the gas tank, so when you flip over, it has enough line inside the tank to move around and get the fuel. As you can see, it's a little bit long there towards the end of the gas tank, and that's just the length that you want it, just barely touching the edge of that back side of the gas tank. So we are running out of time here. This is coming up on the end of our video. This is going to be our pressure line. Cut this a little bit longer, obviously, like the fuel line there. But hope you guys enjoyed this one. I'm gonna leave you hanging. We're almost done with this build. We got the front and rear end to put on, and then our engine. That'll be an exciting video. So thanks for staying tuned, guys. I appreciate it, and I'll see you in the next one.